Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 72 based on novel. So let's start. In the Void Minefield, the hot battle is going on fiercely. Yang Bing alone against Guli Kai Phosphorus, but he could not lose the wind, and there was a little room for maneuver between his shots, which made him more comfortable in the battle. On the other side, the battle between Zhong Hao and the North King has to be significantly divided. Bei Wang himself is only a puppet, but different from others, he is not an ordinary puppet. When Xiao Yan was refining the North King, he sealed his lifelong combat experience in it, which made the North King give full play to the power of the 6-star-and-half Emperor without knowing the pain. In addition, this indestructible puppet body, even with the strength of Zhong Hao's 7-star-and-half Emperor, cannot break the North King's flesh. Therefore, under the most primitive and violent boxing and kicking of the North King, Zhong Hao, who is the peak of the later 7-star-and-half Emperor, is only forced to be beaten. In the end, Yang Bing was restrained by Guli Kai Phosphorus and Zhong Hao was tyrannized by the Northern King. At the moment, only Xiao Yang, Mo Zhai, Hu Laoge and the strongest one present, Mu Han of the 9-star-and-half Emperor, are still standing in the void. While the battle on the spot was going on fiercely, on the periphery of the whole battle circle, those semi-emperors who originally just wanted to come to practice and devour the power of thunder were stunned after seeing Xiao Yang blow up a 7-star semi-emperor in the most violent way. They have all heard of Xiao Yang's arrogance and know that Xiao Yang once defeated several 7-star-and-half emperors, but if they beat a 7-star-and-half emperor like today, this is the first time they have seen. Tut tut. This rock owl is really a person against the sky. 3-stars-and-half emperors blow up 7-stars-and-half emperors. If the news is spread, I'm afraid the name of Rock Owl will stir the whole southern region. Hey, not only that, but not only his master's strength is terrible, but even his puppet can be so powerful. A puppet whose strength reaches the semi-emperor level. Looking at the whole southern region, I'm afraid that only that force will have it. Is it true that the Rock Owl came from there? Several semi-emperor strongmen stared at the North King who was tyrannicating Zhong Hao, and suddenly said with a surprised voice. At the mention of that force, the faces of several semi-imperial strongmen around him changed slightly. If so, the rock owl in front of him would be more annoying. Well, anyway, everyone, if it's necessary later, I think it's better to try my best to help him. After all, no matter whether the rock owl is the person of that power or not, you and I can see his future growth potential. You won't lose if you help him once. After pondering for a moment, an old man with the strength of 8.5 stars whispered to the others around him. After hearing the old man's words, several other semi-imperial strongmen looked at each other and shook their heads. At present, the growth potential of the rock owl is really worth fighting for him, but don't forget that Xiao Yang is facing more than 8.5 stars. As a 9-star-and-a-half emperor, Mu Han is a real giant in the wild ancient city. Even if Xiao Yang's talent is terrible, what can he do in front of Mu Han? He can't escape being killed. Therefore, these semi-emperors will not provoke a 9-star semi-emperor for a dying man. Seeing this, the 8-star-and-a-half emperor's old man could only sigh helplessly, said no more, and turned to continue to watch the war in the field. Go and help Yang Bing. This boy, I have to do it myself. Seeing the old Hu monster beside Mo Zhai staring at Xiao Yang, Mu Han immediately frowned and said in a deep voice to the latter. Hu Laoge frowned when he heard the speech. His eyes glanced over Mu Han and found that the latter was looking at himself. Although he was dissatisfied with the latter's strength, Hu Laoge had to nod silently. Casually glanced at Mo Zhai, who was watching coldly. Hu Laoge's old eyes narrowed, then his body moved and flew towards the battle circle of Yang Bing. When passing by Xiao Yang, the only weak voice that he could hear was passed into his ears. Do it for me and hold Yang Bing. Simple words, but let Hu Laoge's eyes suddenly become sharp, slightly undetectable nodded, and the speed under his feet was also raised in an instant. Passing by Xiao Yang, Hu Laoge's body quickly rushed to the battle circle where Yang Bing was. Xiao Yang's mouth stirred up a cold smile and raised his eyes, which happened to touch Mu Han's eyes. Mu Han stared at Xiao Yang with both eyes. Seeing the sneer at the corner of the latter's mouth, he couldn't help feeling a trace of strangeness in his heart. With a cold hum, Mu Han left his concerns in his heart and walked towards Xiao Yang step by step in the void. Facing Mu Han, Xiao Yang slowly put away the sneer from the corners of his mouth. The fighting spirit in his body quietly runs all over his body and is always ready to deal with Mu Han's attack. At the same time, on the other side, the figure of Hu Laoge has appeared not far behind Yang Bing. Yang Bing could not help but frown slightly when he felt the breath of the old Hu monster behind him. The old Hu monster's actions made him feel a little strange, but then, Jiu Li and Kai Phosphorus in front of him showed their fighting skills again and roared at him. Facing the two people in front of him, Yang Bing didn't dare to be careless. The fighting spirit in his body poured out wildly, and all kinds of terrible fighting skills bombarded and blocked the two people in front of him. However, just when the war between the three became more and more fierce, behind Yang Bing, a dry palm was firmly printed on Yang Bing's back with unparalleled power. Boom! Suddenly, the fighting spirit that had long condensed in the palm poured out crazily, invaded Yang Bing's body, and wantonly destroyed the internal organs, meridians, and fighting spirit in his body. At the same time, Yang Bing's body also suddenly solidified, and the fighting skills in his hands lost the support of fighting spirit. Under the impact of Jiu Li, he just insisted on a short period of time, and then burst with a bang. The rest of his power bombarded Yang Bing's body, and his body also flew out uncontrollably. The appearance of this scene made several people of Mojai in the field stunned at the moment, and their faces could not help showing a look of horror. In any case, they could not imagine that in this sure war, the old monster who, as an 8-star-and-a-half emperor, would suddenly turn against the water at this moment. It is really unimaginable. You know, in such a high-level war, the defection of a semi-imperial strongman will have a great impact on the whole war situation. Therefore, at the moment, the sudden backwater of Hu Laogai will make them feel frightened. Not only that, on the sidelines at the moment, those semi-imperialist strong men who are watching the war are surprised to see that Hu Laogai, who belongs to Mojai, suddenly turned against the water. They all know that Hu Laogai should try his best to help Mojai by taking money and eliminating disasters for others, but the current situation is just the opposite. At this moment, not only Mojai, but even outsiders like them can't guess the reason. Hu Laogai, you are crazy. Yang Bing, who flew thousands of miles upside down, struggled to stop his body. First, he spewed out a big mouthful of scarlet blood mixed with visceral fragments, and then looked up at old Hu with a pale face, with a ferocious roar. However, in the face of Yang Bing's roar, Hu Laogai grinned. A joking smile appeared between Senbai's teeth, coupled with the sneer-like eyes, which made Yang Bing look at it, and his heart was very angry. Old monster Hu, you're doing this, but it's against our previous agreement. When the roar in Yang Bing's mouth fell, Mojai raised his eyes, stared at Hu Laogai with a pair of dark old eyes, and said in a very gloomy voice. Hearing the speech, Hu Laogai turned his eyes with a sneer, looked at Mojai, his arms around his chest, and said with a puzzled sneer, "Oh, agreement. What agreement?" Hu Laogai blurted out. Mojai first looked a little frozen, and then his face suddenly became ugly. The palm hidden under his sleeve robe was slowly clenched. Mojai was so angry that his face trembled. After a long time, he drank angrily. "What do you mean by this? Do you want to turn your face and not recognize people?" Hu Laogai sneered again, looked at Jiu Li and Kai Phosphorus beside him, turned his eyes and said with a sarcastic smile, "Don't you see that I've turned my face? You." This time, Mojai was really angry. He took a big breath, as if to calm the anger in his chest. His thin body was shaking constantly, because the anger in his heart had made him unable to be quiet. "Okay. Even if you turn your face, please give me a reason." Finally, Mojai seemed very difficult. He took a deep breath, his mood was slightly stable, his scarlet eyes stared at old Hu, and his voice was a little hoarse. Hu Laogai sneered. He glanced at Xiao Yang on the other side and noticed that Hu Laogai's eyes came. Xiao Yang then smiled. His eyes were full of inexplicable meaning. "My rule is to take people's money and eliminate disasters for others. When I take the money, I naturally have to work. It's impossible. I made an agreement with you first. The boy won't recognize you before you reach the wilderness." As soon as Hu Laogai blurted out his words, Mojai immediately shouted angrily, "There is a good agreement between us, but Mr. Yang Xiao's bid is higher, and his reward has been paid. As for you, the pills you have on you seem to have been used up in order to auction the Thunder Post." As soon as he said this, Mojai was speechless. He didn't know that there would be such a guy at the auction. He had more imperial pills than him. If it weren't for this reason, he wouldn't take out all his only 4 imperial pills. "Rock Owl. It's you, Rock Owl, again." Mojai couldn't help roaring and was very angry in his heart, but he knew that he would not be Xiao Yang's opponent anyway. Therefore, he turned to look at Mu Han. At the moment, he was the only one who could deal with Xiao Yang. "Master Mu. Come on, I can't imagine that under my shock, you dare to turn back. It's really brave." Mu Han looked at Hu Leoge with a cold face and smiled blandly, as if all this didn't matter. Old Hu's eyebrows wrinkled slightly, his eyes narrowed, and his body moved backward. Mu Han had no psychological reaction to Hu Leoge's small movements. He turned his eyes to Xiao Yang again and said with a smile, "But you have some abilities. No wonder those 7-star and half-emperors can't hold you down. Your strength really exceeds your own level." Xiao Yang's eyes were slightly cold, but he didn't dare to be careless in his heart. Mu Han, as a 9-star and half-emperor, wanted to deal with him. It was too simple. Although he had Tianjueba, his strength was limited after all, and he couldn't give full play to Tianjueba's real power. Therefore, in the next war, once Mu Han starts, Xiao Yang must first prepare for the worst. Whoosh! A fierce breaking wind sounded. Xiao Yang's face became dignified for a moment. He moved and wanted to flash back, but the space in front of him was suddenly broken. Mu Han's figure appeared in front of Xiao Yang. With a wave of his big hand, he blew his palm to Xiao Yang's chest. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang's face became sharp and dignified. Knowing that it was too late to dodge, he had to quickly lift up the fighting spirit in his body, gather in the palm of his hand, and fiercely greet the dry palm coming face to face. Hum! You can't measure your strength. With a cold hum, the power of Mu Han's palm suddenly soared. The turbulent fighting spirit condensed in the palm and released dazzling golden light. Where the palm passed, the void was shattered, and the people who were pressed by the terrible vigorous wind couldn't breathe. Xiao Yang is facing the fierce vigorous wind, and the pressure in his heart is even greater. Is this the power of the 9-star and half-emperor? Sure enough, it is not comparable to the 8-star and half-emperor, Xiao Yang said coldly in his heart. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body was more crazy and condensed into the palm of his hand. In the face of such a strong man as Mu Han, if you can't face it with all your strength, waiting for his result will be the only way to die. Boom! The two palms touched each other, and the terrible fighting spirit broke out in the palms of the two people. However, after a few breaths, Xiao Yang's face suddenly turned pale. Before he could make a response, he was blown out by Mu Han's palm. When Xiao Yang stopped hard, he took a big mouthful of blood and couldn't help spraying it out. The whole person's face suddenly became pale. The original thick breath also quickly became depressed. However, compared with the injury on his body, what shocked Xiao Yang was the strength of Mu Han. Xiao Yang's palm just now, even the 8-star and a half-emperor, can't easily break it. But the Mu Han just now, after he used his real strength, destroyed the withered and decadent, and forcibly broke Xiao Yang's palm. It can be seen how terrible his strength is. The 9-star and half-emperor strong man is really not the existence that the 8 stars can compare. Until now, half of Xiao Yang's body is in the numbness without consciousness. This is also thanks to his strong body. Otherwise, if someone with a weaker body comes, even the 7-star and half-emperor will at least break an arm under Mu Hongang's palm. Hey! Seeing that Xiao Yang was not hurt badly, Mu Han couldn't help but slightly raised his eyebrows and said softly. Obviously, he was a little surprised at the result of his palm. But then he recovered, stared at Xiao Yang in surprise, narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice. Unexpectedly, you not only have great strength, but also cultivate your body to such an extent. This is your capital. No wonder you can take my blow hard. At this point, Mu Han gave a little pause and looked at Xiao Yang with great interest. A moment later, he continued to say. However, if you are only at this level, it is not enough. Use whatever means you have, and let me see what you rely on to defeat the 7-star and half-emperor across the 4 stars. When the voice fell, Mu Han wanted to get up and start again, but then the next moment, his eyebrows wrinkled slightly. He saw 2 figures flying in front of him, blocking his way. These 2 people are Guli and Red Phosphorus. They showed up, looked directly at Mu Han, fought with each other, and were always ready to fight with Mu Han. Rock Owl, you go first. Let's stop him first. Then we'll find a time to leave. When the voice of Jiu Li's words just fell, Mu Han immediately gave a cold hum, saying, Hum, go. None of you want to leave here today. The voice fell, Mu Hanshin read a move, and the surging soul power in the middle of the eyebrows spread rapidly. At the same time, the dry palm under the sleeve robe waved suddenly, and golden lights burst out, quickly surrounding the void. When the golden lights burst out, everyone present quickly became dignified. Is this a ray? Xiao Yang looked around, but he couldn't help frowning. In a twinkling of an eye, the whole space was shrouded in those golden lights. Hundreds of golden lights were scattered on the void. Under the control of Mu Han, Each group of golden lights diffused a barrier. All the barriers were spliced together, sealing Mu Han and Xiao Yang. Although Xiao Yang wanted to use Tianjue's step to leave here, the barrier was spliced one step at a time. No matter how fast he was, he couldn't leave this space. Jiyu Li and Red Phosphorus looked at the barrier with dignified faces. Compared with the herbalist, the array mage was really terrible in the actual battle. The strength of the medicine refiner lies in the magical effect of the pill. Life and death are human flesh and bones. They can turn the tide and save people's lives. However, the array mage can rely on the benefit of the array, attack and defend, attack and defend. Compared with the convergence edge of the medicine refiner, they are sharp. The body moved. Before Xiao Yang came to the barrier, although he was strong in the body, he was not seriously injured. Therefore, while the body stopped, Xiao Yang clenched his right fist fiercely, and his just recovered right arm was full of strength again. In the palm of his hand, the fighting spirit gathered rapidly, and his right fist was lifted up. Xiao Yang's body was slightly on one side, and a fist fell down. 8-pole collapse. Dang! The ferocious fist wrapped with the power of terror smashed on the barrier. In exchange, it was a crisp ring like a bell and ripples like water waves. The ripples dispersed, and the barrier recovered to be flat and intact, but Xiao Yang's heart couldn't help sinking slightly. The strength of this barrier is far beyond his imagination. Xiao Yang's 8-pole collapse, in front of this barrier, has little effect. Although it can disperse the energy on the barrier a little, as long as the blink of an eye, the whole barrier will recover again. If it goes on like this, I'm afraid even if Xiao Yang blows 10 and 100 more, he can't break the barrier. Jiyu Li and Red Phosphorus felt a little cold at the bottom of their hearts. With the defense degree of this barrier, they were afraid that they would have a chance to smash it if they had to fight together. But now Mu Han is in front of them. If they want to contain the latter, only Jiyu Li and Li can barely contain the time for a moment. Once the time is long, they are not Mu Han's opponents. My array used 300 array plates to form a barrier. Even if it was 8 stars and a half emperors, it would be difficult to break it without an hour or two. Do you think it's up to you to break it by force, maybe? Mu Han stared at Xiao Yang with both eyes and a sneer of disdain. As a 9-star and half emperor, a third-order array mage, he had absolute confidence and assurance in the face of Xiao Yang. Hearing Mu Han's words, Xiao Yang felt more heavy. Although Mu Han's words were more or less exaggerated, the horror of the barrier was also real. Xiao Yang had to admit that it was really difficult to defeat the barrier with his current strength. Boom! However, just when Xiao Yang felt heavy in his heart, an explosion like thunder suddenly sounded behind Xiao Yang. At the moment of the explosion, Xiao Yang's face suddenly became frightened. Regardless of the bursts of pain from the remaining injuries in his body, Xiao Yang suddenly moved. Tianjue's step showed up in an instant and turned back. But when Xiao Yang looked up at the explosion with a trembling face, the next moment, his face looked stunned. Just outside the barrier, there was an old man with knots between his hands. In the void in front of him, a huge finger emitting golden light was gathering rapidly. Seeing Xiao Yang's eyes coming, the old man immediately laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, I've heard that Mr. Yang Xiao seems to be simple, but his strength is far better than his accomplishments. I still don't believe it. When I see him today, he is really the dragon in the crowd. Ha ha. The old gentleman praised me falsely, but I don't know. Why are you doing this?" Hearing the words praised by the old man, Xiao Yang arched his hands and smiled back. "Ha ha, I'm also a talent lover. I'm in trouble when I see Mr. Yang Xiao, so I'm willing to help you." "Well, thank you for your help." Hearing this, Xiao Yang felt relaxed, and a smile for the rest of his life appeared on his face. He quickly thanked the old man. Mr. Yang Xiao is polite. My real name is Zhongli. Mr. Yang Xiao can just call me my name, and I'm not polite. Call you Brother Yang Xiao. Brother Zhongli. Xiao Yang immediately laughed. Someone helped, which surprised Xiao Yang. Now it's just a title. Xiao Yang naturally won't hesitate. The voice of the two fell, and the huge fingers in front of Zhongli were condensed. Then they were a little handy, and the golden fingers blasted up at the barrier with earth-shaking terror. Boom! There was another explosion, and the whole barrier condensed by the array suddenly trembled. Waves of energy ripples like waves spread rapidly on the barrier, but RAO was so. After the power of the golden finger was completely exhausted, the barrier was still alive. Seeing this scene, Zhongli could not help but frown. The array of admiring cold was indeed some good. Zhongli, unexpectedly, even you dare to interfere in my affairs. This boy really gives you great courage. Mu Han looked at Zhongli with a gloomy face, and his words were full of disdain. Do you really think that you rabble can beat me? With a deep and fierce drink, the soul power in the heart of Mu Han's eyebrows suddenly poured out wildly, and the formula printed in his hand changed rapidly, and the large array enveloping the whole space also changed. Mu Han waved his palm and several streamers burst out. He quickly disappeared into the array and disappeared. Drink. With a fierce drink, Mu Han suddenly shot away at Jiyu Li and the two people. At the same time, the palm turned over and gathered his fighting spirit. With one palm, he bombarded the two people. Boom. The wave of terrifying fighting spirit swept quickly around the three people, pounded hard on the barrier and made circles of ripples. After a few breaths, Mu Han's arm, which was touching Jiyu Li in the field, suddenly shook, and the terrible fighting spirit poured out again, smashing their fighting skills. Jiyu Li were also involved when their fighting skills were broken. With a dull hum, they both turned pale and quickly stepped back out. They stopped their body shape, but their palms under their sleeves and robes were shaking uncontrollably. The power of the 9.5 Emperor is indeed so terrible. Although they started together and wanted to stop Mu Han, it was also very difficult. Rock Owl, come on, break the barrier, leave here quickly and drag it down. This guy will be serious. At that time, we're afraid no one can get away, come on. Jiyu Li's fierce cry came again. Xiao Yang looked back solemnly, and his eyes focused on the barrier in front of him again. Although there were him and Zhongli, the barrier was really extraordinary. After Mu Han's reinforcement just now, it was even more difficult to break through. Damn. I don't believe it. I've killed all the 8.5 emperors, and I can't deal with you, a broken barrier. Seeing the more dignified look on Jiyu Li's face, Xiao Yang finally got up completely and solemnly. Imperial Seal Formula. Ancient Imperial Seal. Break it for me. A set of Imperial Seal Formula was quickly displayed. The huge golden handprint smashed on the barrier with the momentum of destruction, but the final result was still the same as before, only stirring up circles of energy ripples. When the ripples dispersed, the barrier recovered again. Damn! Isn't there any loophole in this broken array? Seeing the barrier restored again, Xiao Yang couldn't help roaring again. Although Zhongli helped, even if they wanted to break the barrier with their strength, it would take at least an hour. But this time, Jiyu Li couldn't do it at all. With Mu Han's strength, if he tries his best, he can suppress them by himself. Just like this situation now, if he continues, Jiyu Li and them will be completely defeated in half an hour at most. At that time, Xiao Yang can only face Mu Han by himself. As for the old monster who, after he had solved Yang Bing, he quickly dodged and left while Xiao Yang and Mu Han didn't pay attention. It's obviously too late to find it now. Therefore, he is also the first unreliable guy. Hey, smelly boy, why, it's hard for you to work alone without the old man and me. At the critical moment, Jiyu's light laughter finally came out like a life-saving straw, which made Xiao Yang happy. Old Bone, help to see how this array can be broken. For Guyo's teasing words, Xiao Yang didn't want to joke with him more. He hurried to ask about the trouble he was facing. Hearing this, Guyo couldn't help spitting at Xiao Yang. Immediately, he explored the barrier in front of him. Hey, this array is not bad. After a long time, the bone in Xiao Yang's body was quiet, but such a sentence surprised Xiao Yang's face, and he felt a dignified sigh in his heart. But then, Jiyu opened his mouth again and said softly to Xiao Yang, "However, this is only for you, if you take me. It's something I can't see at all." Hearing this, Xiao Yang's heart relaxed again. His body softened. Xiao Yang was sweating and said to the bone in his heart, "Old man, please finish your words at once next time, otherwise, like you, even if I don't get killed by him, I should be scared to death by you." Hey. Jiyu Yushan smiled, then returned to normal, explored the barrier in front of Xiao Yang again, and then smiled at Xiao Yang. Although the so-called array mage is different from the herbalist, the cohesion of the array also comes from the soul power. You should know this. Xiao Yang nodded secretly in his heart. To say, the essence of array mage and medicine refiner is the same, but one specializes in power and the other is specialized in guarding. This array is just the most common array. With the help of the power of 300 array plates, it condenses each other to form a boundary and trap people in it. Such a large boundary can only trap some ordinary 8.5 emperors at most, and it won't be long, but it's enough for Mu Han at present. Xiao Yang listened carefully to Jiyu's analysis and stood still, which surprised Zhongli outside the border. He didn't believe that Xiao Yang would give up so easily. On the other side, Jiyu Li and the others were also struggling to resist Mu Han with heavy faces. The remaining light in the corner of their eyes caught a glimpse of Xiao Yang standing motionless in the void. They were not surprised, but they were almost hurt by Mu Han. What the hell is this guy doing? If it goes on like this, we can't support it. After another collision, Gu Li and Kai Phosphorus were blown back by Mu Han. They looked at Xiao Yang quickly. Kai Phosphorus frowned and said in a dignified voice. Jiyu Li shook his head to express his helplessness. Although he had infinite curiosity about Xiao Yang, he also had all kinds of helplessness. Hehe, you dare to be distracted when you fight with me? At this time, Mu Hanbing's cold laughter came again. They moved quickly and fell into a difficult struggle with Mu Han again. Buzz. Suddenly, Xiao Yang, who closed his eyes slightly, suddenly opened his eyes, and his breath returned to the peak again. His fierce eyes swept across the barrier, but it was like a cold front, leaving a thin scratch on the barrier. Huh! Seeing Xiao Yang's momentum suddenly changed at the moment, Zhongli's mouth outside the barrier couldn't help but give a surprise, but then, Xiao Yang's body suddenly shook. When his mind moved, the dragon phoenix blood in his body was instantly stimulated, and a pair of arms quickly turned into dragon arms. The appearance of the dragon arm, whether from the visual effect or the invisible threat of Zulong, makes people feel a little heavy breathing. If they are hit by this punch, I'm afraid it's painful enough to rely on the arrogant power even if they don't use fighting spirit. Drink. 8. Pole. Collapse. The roar was like thunder. The huge fist covered by dragon scales hit a point of the barrier. The 8 dark powerful explosions stirred up energy ripples like waves on the barrier. Boom. A punch just fell, followed by another punch, and the continuous bombardment made the whole barrier tremble. Dang. 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 Brother Zhongli, help me, coming. Xiao Yang's voice just fell, and Zhongli outside also blew out without hesitation. The terrible fighting spirit poured out like a mountain torrent and fell on the point that Xiao Yangang had just bombarded. That's where one of the 300 array plates of the whole array is located. Drink. Towering hand. Huangquan palm. With a fierce drink, Xiao Yang's 2 palms burst out and bombarded the barrier in front of him. The terrible explosion spread throughout the minefield. Compared with the fierce battle in Muhon, Xiao Yang's action attracted the attention of these semi-emperor strongmen. They have never seen a 3-star-and-half emperor who can erupt the terrorist force that makes 8-star-and-half emperors feel ashamed, but today, they have seen it with their own eyes. Under the indiscriminate bombardment of Xiao Yang and Zhongli, the strength of the barrier has been gradually weakened. The original golden barrier now looks bleak. The thick barrier is only 2 inches thick, just like it is about to collapse. But RAO is so, but Xiao Yang and Zhongli dare not be careless. The defense power of the barrier in front of them is far beyond their imagination. After all, it is the power of 300 arrays. Even they can't ignore it. Once they relax, it will recover a lot in an instant. At that time, what they do will be in vain. Bang! However, while Xiao Yang was trying his best to smash the barrier, Jiyu Li, Kai Phosphorus and Mu Han were defeated by the latter. After a collision, they couldn't hold up and were blown away again. Their faces suddenly became as pale as paper. Their deep pupils gradually became radiant. Their breath fell to a low point. Although they didn't die, they also fell to the end of near serious injury. 2 people who don't know what to do. I really think you can fight me? Mu Lengran smiled, and his tone was full of disdain. If it weren't for their special identity, how could he keep his hand? He should have killed it. After a long time, Mu Han raised his slightly boring eyes and looked at Xiao Yang, who was constantly pounding the barrier. A cold smile slowly appeared at the corners of his mouth. I want to see who can protect you without them. This video will end here.